family building, reproductive health, trying to get pregnant or fall pregnant. Why is that small talk? Why do people think it's just something to bring up in a social event?
Gosh, I think it's a lot of things. On a nice level, I believe that people genuinely want to find a level to communicate with others. They want to find that common ground, and for some reason, women's fertility and reproduction just falls into that category of small talk.
Yeah.
So I think we're conditioned a little bit, and people just genuinely want that connection, especially around the holidays. We're talking about families. It's all very lovely in a lot of ways, but not when you are struggling with infertility.
When are you having a baby? When are you going to give that child of yours a sibling? You don't want to be selfish, do you? Your mom is going to make such an amazing grandmother. What are you waiting for? If you have been bombarded with these inappropriate questions, this episode is for you. We are going to learn how to navigate other people's expectations of your fertility and learn how to answer those awkward and inappropriate questions. Today, we have Jennifer Edmonds, infertility warrior and fertility yoga and support provider, here to help us set some boundaries. Welcome to the Baby or Bust Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, a double board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist and former fertility and IVF patient myself, who have been helping people build their families for over 20 years. In this podcast, you're going to learn from incredible infertility warriors, experts in the field, and in-depth discussions on all things reproductive health. Your fertility is not small talk, but it can certainly feel that way when you go to social gatherings, cocktail parties, and the holidays are almost upon us. So there's going to be a lot of those awkward conversations. I used to dread going to gatherings, knowing that I was going to be asked about my family plans, when I was going to have a baby, be reminded that I was putting my career first before my fertility, and just really trying to navigate all of these awkward questions and tough boundary setting. Here to help us navigate these bombshell questions and help us set our own boundaries is Jennifer Edmonds. Jen, welcome to the show.
Dr. Lora, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for having me. Can I call you Dr. Lora?
Please just call me Lora. Please. And I found you. You showed up on my For You page or Instagram Reels. You just came into my feed and I was like, who is this? You just are so funny and talking about fertility, and which is such a vulnerable and difficult topic, but you just get it. It is so obvious that you get it, and you do it with such humor. So when I was trying to think how can I talk about this tough topic of boundaries and family expectations, we got the holidays coming up. I was like, I've just got to chat with Jen. I know she can help us navigate this tough topic, but it's just sometimes you just got to laugh a little bit.
You really do. Thank you for that. And I completely agree. If we don't laugh sometimes along this journey, we'll just be crying every day,
Exactly.
Which probably happens a lot of the time as well. So I have a fertility story of my own. I spent many years trying to build my family, and it wasn't until the second journey, I had both primary and secondary infertility. My daughter was born after my second round of IVF, which we were very lucky. She was our one little untested embryo that magically made it all the way. And when it came time to having a second child, we thought that, we'd go back to IVF, we'd have the same kind of experience and we'd move on with our lives. But it actually ended up being a much longer and a much more difficult journey than the first. We were hit with a few extra diagnoses, which was unexpected. And then COVID happened. And as I'm sure you're well aware, most of the clinics around the world closed down because we were considered non-essential surgeries. So there was no option to continue IVF. And I thought that was it for us. We had this beautiful little 3-year-old girl, and I'm so lucky that we had gotten that far. But, and I'm sure every woman can relate to this. My family just didn't feel complete. And my husband and I are only children. We always just wanted to build our family. And it was around this time that a friend of mine who I used to work with, she said, have you ever heard of this thing called fertility yoga? And I said, no, I haven't. I've just been through another round of IVF, I don't think a bit of yoga is going to make any difference. But I was one of those crazy type A people that had literally tried everything under the sun. And we were in lockdown. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't try any other fertility treatments. I thought, look, I'll give this yoga thing a go. And it really changed so much in my life without sounding too dramatic. It really gave me some peace back that I had completely lost throughout my fertility journey. It helped my physical health, my mental and emotional health. I think I was a lot nicer to my husband. And
Oh,
we actually ended up falling pregnant naturally. And I attribute a lot of that
amazing.
to just being able to take a step back and regulate my nervous system a little bit more. And who knows how the universe works, but it was quite a journey and a very unexpected ending. So I
Oh,
then decided to retrain as a yoga teacher. I had been a Pilates instructor for about 15 years, and yoga wasn't something that was really on my radar, but I thought it's different. And there's something
mhm.
here that I feel I can offer to women to help them through this time as well, to give them back that sense of peace that I was able to find. So that's what I do now. And I do a lot of pre and postnatal work with my beautiful students, but most of the work I do now is focused on fertility. So that's what
Mm.
brings me here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. 1 in 5 couples that have IVF in order to have a child actually go on to conceive without assistance. And I love that you said fall pregnant. So Jen is coming to us from Sydney, Australia, and I always know it's Australian when people say fall pregnant.
Is
I
it
love that
really?
term.
I didn't know
Mhm.
that. How funny. What do
Yeah.
Americans say?
Oh my gosh, getting pregnant or
Okay.
got pregnant, but the falling pregnant is very Australian. I think it's very
Interesting.
very cool. So along your journey, when you were struggling with both primary and secondary infertility, which I did too, so I really empathize. I am sure that you faced some pretty interesting and awkward conversations, just in social gatherings and especially around holidays, like, oh, how long have you guys been married? When are you going to have a kid? And why do you think that, in your opinion, family building, reproductive health, trying to get pregnant or fall pregnant, why is that small talk? Why do people think it's just something to bring up in a social event?
Gosh, I think it's a lot of things. On a nice level, I believe that people genuinely want to find a level to communicate with others. They want to find that common ground, and all these things that we are brought up to believe are small talk. The weather, where you work, all of these things. And for some reason, women's fertility and reproduction just falls into that category of small talk.
Yeah.
So I think we're conditioned a little bit, and people just genuinely want that connection, especially around the holidays. We're talking about families. It's all very lovely in a lot of ways, but not when you are struggling with infertility. So I think there's that. But on the other slightly not so nice side, it is a lot of ignorance. I don't
Right.
feel like you would casually talk about how healthy you were to someone who is battling a chronic illness or perhaps a cancer
Yeah.
diagnosis or anything like that. You wouldn't go on about, oh, well, here's my advice and, here's how
Right.
I stay healthy. It's one of those weird things that I feel we're just conditioned to talk about. And when we're growing up, especially as teenage girls, we're taught the moment we have sex without protection, we're going to fall pregnant.
Yep.
I truly believed that, as most of the women I grew up with do as well. So I think that this idea of around, what is it, 1 in 6 couples now are struggling with
Hmm.
infertility is just not on people's radars. We are not talking about these things. We feel very alone when we're going through these journeys. There's only a select number of people I find that are talking about it openly and feel comfortable and safe to share their journeys openly. And,
Hmm.
we see so much pushback as well. I'm sure you see this all the time on social media. People are really nasty about
Mm.
women's reproductive rights. And
Yeah.
there are so many instances where people will leave awful comments and,
Hmm.
it's not meant to be and get over it and why don't you just adopt, and all of these comments that people feel that they're allowed to throw at you. And of course you don't want to be open about your journey when those are the
Yeah.
responses that you're getting. So it is a bit of ignorance, sadly, but genuinely I think people do want to connect, and I used to try to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is really true. Like especially at a family gathering where people might be talking about, catching up over the last year, and they were at your wedding a couple of years ago, and now it's just sort of like the natural next step in like a typical kind of family or life journey. And so they're just kind of like assuming like, okay, well that's probably next. Like, when is that going to happen? And the ignorance part is not understanding that who you're making sort of a light comment to could have had a miscarriage last week, or could have, just done, is taking shots, and they have to go to the bathroom to do their trigger shot, like after we serve the turkey at Thanksgiving in the US. Like, I just think that you're right. It's trying to connect, and it's a lot of ignorance. And so we are getting ready for, I call it like the holiday slide. So it kind of starts with Halloween in the US. That is a family focused holiday, all the cute little costumes. Then we go to Thanksgiving in November, which is, family gathering, sharing a table, food, all of that. And then it is, the December holidays, whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah, and then it's New Year's. I mean, it's just like this holiday slide. And, with all of the gatherings, there's a lot of work events. There's a lot of catching up with people that you haven't seen for a while. And the family questions always come. So I want to talk to people about some coping mechanisms as you're looking at all of these events that are coming into your calendar. Any tips or advice for people that are kind of looking at things and planning, like, should I go, should I not go, kind of what they could do if they do go.
It's such a tough one, isn't it? And there are things that you just can't avoid. There are things
Yeah.
that you can politely decline, which is great. But come on, I mean, you're not going to say no to your family on Christmas Day or
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. Maybe you are. I don't know. I didn't ever feel like I could do that. But there are
Yeah.
so many things that I talk about this a lot with my students at this time of the year, because it is such a tough one and everyone dreads all of these questions. And just personally, it's a really tough time to be wanting a family and to not have one, because everywhere you look, that is all that you see. And it's heartbreaking. It really is. So my first bit of advice is, if you can say no, just say no and don't feel bad about it.
Mhm.
Even if it's a white lie and you just text that person and say, look, I'm not feeling great today. I don't think I can come. I don't think there
Yeah.
is any shame in that. And you're protecting your
Yeah.
heart. And we should just all be okay with saying no sometimes. But of
Yeah.
course, then there are the events where we can't say no. And what do we do in those situations? So one thing I like to remind my students is, don't go to those events, if you can, in a place of feeling really dysregulated and really overwhelmed and really stressed. What can you do earlier in the day to get yourself into a better place? So
Hmm.
whether that's spending time with your partner and just doing something that you love together, getting outside, going for a walk. And I know in the Northern Hemisphere it gets very cold at this time of year, so maybe it isn't possible for everyone. But getting outside, being around nature is magic for your nervous system. It really does regulate you automatically.
Mhm. Mhm.
Things like getting a little bit of sunlight early on in the morning is really helpful. Maybe you've got 10 minutes to do a guided meditation or move your body in some way, so that
Mhm.
you're not just sat around thinking about, I'm so terrified of going to this event, it's overwhelming. Whatever you can do to get yourself into a better place before you go is really helpful. And then when you're there, I know this sounds like so much work, and it's like one of those annoying things that people who are struggling with fertility have to add to their plate. And I find that that is really frustrating. But when you do perhaps prepare a little bit, it can make your life easier in the long run. So here's what I usually guide people with. First of all, take a support person with you if you can, whether that's your partner or a friend, or if it's a family gathering, maybe, look, not all your family members are going to be understanding and asking the right questions, but whether it's your cousin or your sibling or your mother, and just say, look, could you have a word with people and just tell them to back off and, just make
Mhm.
sure this is not on the table, if that's possible.
Right.
And if it isn't, and you know that people are just going to be asking their questions because that's what they do, maybe have a response prepared for them. And we can go through some responses later and what you might say to those people, but just know in your mind what you might say and have
Mhm.
some other topics ready to quickly divert the conversation from. And this again sounds like a lot of work, but it does really help you if you can quickly just answer the question in a non-committal way, and then let's talk about, oh, you just got a new puppy, or, I'm starting a new job next year and I'm so excited about that, or, we've got this trip booked, or you just came back from all of these things. And there are so many world events going on at the moment that we can probably change the subject to pretty quickly.
Totally.
Take the focus away from yourself. So I think that is a really good way. So get yourself in a good place before you go. Take a support person with you if you can, and just have some other talking points ready to go so that you can quickly divert conversation and not feel like you're stuck in this circle of talking about families again.
Oh, I think those are really, really great pieces of advice. I love the idea of doing something to fill your bucket before you get there. I often talk to my patients about having a way to decompress afterwards, and sort of planning that. Like, I always watch this one movie every year, the weekend after Thanksgiving, to kind of bring in the holidays. I always watch the movie Love Actually. I just love that movie. I love the star-studded cast, and it just sort of helps me bring in the holidays. And so I always look forward to that. I often share that with patients. And then the other thing you said, to kind of, it's okay to say no. Also, I talk about, if you know what is going to happen, like if your family has a pretty typical pattern, like you come, you sit around for an hour or two, then you sit down to dinner, maybe you show up a little bit late. You kind of know that you don't have to be there for the hour or two where people are just milling around. And then another thing I thought of recently was, if you've just got that like Aunt Clara that is just going to, needle you a little bit, be a little bit more nosy, figure out a way not to sit next to Aunt Clara, whoever your Aunt Clara is, or Uncle Bob, like, and that's sort of where the support person can come in, just to sort of, if they see Aunt Clara coming across to try to ask you a bunch of questions about when you're going to make your mom a grandma, then that person might kind of come in and sort of change topics too, because you just might not have a lot of strength to sort of really deflect a lot. Those are all really, really helpful tips. I appreciate that. Truly.
I love that idea of decompressing afterwards as well. That's something that's really helpful, because you've got time and space afterwards and you don't have to think about it anymore. And watching a funny movie, like you said, there's so many great, ridiculous Christmas movies that are nonsense that just fill up your serotonin bucket a little bit and replace that. Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah. All right. So now our listeners have decided to go. They've braved it. They're not saying no. They've got a plan. And even though they have their support person and they're avoiding the people that often ask the nosy questions, let's give some prep, or some of the, the things, like the ways to respond, and I kind of feel like there's sort of categories, where if you get a question that's like, when are you going to have a baby, or when are you going to make your mom a grandma? Like, there's different ways to answer. And so I kind of like thinking about like blunt ways. Like these are the ways that when I get home, I'm like, man, I wish I had said that, like kind of the little stingers. Like, do you have any thoughts on those? Like, oh, when are you going to give your child a sibling? It's so selfish to have them be an only child. I mean, that's just like, it's just like a dagger. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sometimes you do need to go for the blunt response, don't you? Because that's the only way. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. You can kind of educate people at the same time. As
that's true.
Awkward as it might be in the moment, it could save you or someone else further heartbreak down the track. So I think that's really helpful. I think this idea of, would you ask a man that question, is a really good one. Because would they? I don't see a lot of that happening. I don't know how often my husband was asked when we were starting a family compared to me. And I think that's a really good one. It sort of, takes people back a little bit.
Yeah. And makes you pause.
Exactly. You can say, that's really personal. Next question.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Next, as Ariana Grande once said.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love it. You could say something like, well, when we afford another round of IVF, do you want to loan us the money? those
That's a
are
good one. Oh, and that's so painful because so many people need the medical treatment to be able to have a child and they can't because there's financial limitations are so real. It's really
mm,
important.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So I think if you want to go down the slightly less blunt, but educate people a little bit more, you could say things along the lines of, do you know it's actually around 1 in 6 couples these days that are struggling with infertility? And that's a question that's going to really upset a lot of people, myself included. So I'd like to talk about something else today.
Yeah.
Things like that are, I think, vulnerable ways to address the question, but also gently educate them as well.
Yeah, I do like that because you're not being so blunt like, like I don't know, maybe I'll never have a kid, I'll get back to you soon or maybe I will when you stop asking. Like you kind of feel like you want to just like punch back, but actually trying to do it a little bit softer and sort of educating at the same time. You might help a future fertility warrior, if
Mm.
that person learns a little bit. But you're so kind, Jen. I'm usually like the yeah.
It's
That's
the
really
yoga
good.
teacher in me. No, but exactly as you said, that there was plenty of times where I went home and was like, I really just wish I'd thrown a few punches at that party instead.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes
Yeah.
you feel better. I think just being clear about setting boundaries is really helpful with people, saying things like, I'd really rather not discuss this. I find this an upsetting question. You could say,
Mhm.
I just don't want to discuss this with you. You can just completely ignore it. Just change the subject. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
Keep harping on about it? I mean, maybe some people will, but hopefully the majority of people have enough social skills to realize the topic has been changed and they might move on.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yeah, just kind
Mm,
of like pretend like you don't hear it and talk about like, your next vacation or something. Yeah.
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 If you feel comfortable with that person being open and being vulnerable, you can say things like, I appreciate you asking, but it's actually been a really difficult year and this isn't something I'm ready to talk about yet. Or we've been trying and we just haven't had any success and I don't want to talk about it, but hopefully I'll have some news soon. And this is often what I find where people start throwing out the advice, because when you're open and vulnerable, people are like, "Oh, I've got so many tips for you." So
Oh, I know.
be
Yeah, the
wary of that one.
advice. Right, that's true. That's true. You open up and you're vulnerable and you're trying to share, and then they
Mm.
start with any time the next sentence that comes out of that person's mouth starts with just or at least run. Like just run. Just relax, just go on vacation, or at least, if you have a miscarriage, well, at least you can get pregnant, at least there's the option of IVF, oh my gosh. Yeah. So if you do open up and you're kind and vulnerable, you have to maybe figure out ways to kind of shut it down if it starts to
Mm.
go in that direction too. That's a really good point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you are feeling up for it, you can kind of make a joke about it. I find, there's so many silly things that you can say. People are like, have you tried IVF? I'm like, no, I just thought, just leave it up to chance. Or if you thought about just
Yeah.
relaxing, I'm like, oh no, we wanted to try IVF before we tried relaxing. That was definitely a way,
Yes. Oh,
just
that's good.
people make the stupidest comments. You can make a joke around, well, I've already got a husband. That's one child. That's enough for me. Things like that,
Yeah.
anything else, or, you know, whatever comes to mind. As soon as I figure it out, maybe don't ask them for too much advice, but, yes. And then the inevitable, oh, well, ha, 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 you can have one of my kids. I'm sick of them
Oh,
over the holidays. And yeah, those get tough too, don't they?
oh my gosh, I remember people saying stuff like that and they think they're making the joke, they think they're making it lighthearted or they'll say things like, "Well, at least you can sleep in, at least you can have a relaxing weekend where I'm going to be like chasing my kids all over, and it's sort of in my heart." And I actually said this a couple of times. I actually said out loud like I would give anything to have that problem.
Exactly. And
And then they'll just kind of stop for a second. And I was like, did you see what I just said? Like, I would give anything to have kids to run around
mm,
with and keep me up.
oh no. And people
Oh,
think you have this easy life, but honestly, going through infertility is early morning doctor's appointments and stressing about being late for work and trying to fit around all of these, acupuncture and this and that, or, it's no walk in the park. So I would take having problems with little kids over that any day, right?
We're going to get back to talking to Jennifer in just a second. I want to remind you how important it is to support the show. If you are learning something in this episode, you have a friend that would benefit from these tips on setting boundaries and how to respond to inappropriate fertility questions, share this episode. That can really help people find the podcast. Wherever you're listening, give us a review, follow the show, let us know how we're doing. It really helps other people find the show and get all these tips about reproductive health. Thank you. Now let's get back to learning more from Jennifer. So I think we've got some really good self-care advice, some good responses to some of these kind of awkward questions and sort of why they come up. And I would love any more tips you have for kind of self-care. I loved that idea of kind of doing something for yourself before you go to an event, and then afterwards kind of decompressing a little bit. Are there things that you share with your clients or things that you find your clients or yourself really help in that process?
I think when we think about self-care, we tend to go to having a massage or a bubble bath, and these things are great. They're all really great. But to get a little bit more serious, I find self-care is really about taking a step back from where you're at in your life, looking at what you really want and where you want your life to go, and really have a big look at what is holding you back from getting there. And no, thinking positively for a few weeks is not going to get you pregnant. Like, infertility is a medical condition and we often need treatment to help us overcome that. But when you have been in this space month after month, year after year for so many of us, you really do start to believe the things that society is telling you. You're too old, your eggs are too old, you've missed your chance. And all of these beliefs really affect our behavior, and then they affect how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So I think if we can take a little step back and really ask ourselves, what are all of these things that I'm telling myself that are kind of running my life in the background? Because it wasn't until COVID happened that I had to stop and take a step back. And I couldn't just go, next treatment, let's go, let's not miss a cycle, no stopping. And I realized how miserable I was. Infertility had affected every part of my life, my relationship, my work, my ability to parent my little girl, my physical health. I found joy in nothing. I didn't want to go out with people. I just wanted to be alone. And that's not me. I am not that kind of person. But it took so much from me. And I never stopped to say to myself, how have I gotten to this place and what can I do to get out of it? So that's what I like to help people with. And, it sounds kind of dramatic, but when you've been in this state for a very long period of time, your nervous system really is sensing this threat day after day. It doesn't understand the difference between the stress of infertility and all of the things that go along with that and the stress of maybe my life is at stake here. Your nervous system just understands stress. It doesn't understand what's causing the stress. So when we can find ways to nourish our bodies physically, come back to that sense of safety and grounding and breath and getting outdoors and movement and all of these things that really, really bring us back to a place of, do you know what the most important thing here is? It is me. And I've forgotten completely about that person. And I think that's where some of the practices that I teach can come into it and really give you back some of those just pieces of your life that you've perhaps lost along the way.
Absolutely. You hit on several themes that we talk about a lot on this show, just how it can almost become addictive, like the next cycle, the next IUI, the next egg retrieval, the next embryo transfer. And as long as you are moving in that direction, you are accomplishing something. And along the way, it seems that you start to feel, and when I say you, I mean me, less and less in control. because you sort of have assumed, oh, it's easy to conceive. Like when I'm ready, it's going to happen. And then it doesn't. And then it doesn't. And then you want to take back control. So then, and you have posted about this, you start buying all these supplements. I've seen your post. You are so good. And you start, taking away foods that nourish your happiness, because I don't know, there was some post that said everyone should stop eating gluten because it's inflammatory. And, and part of being good, like a good fertility patient is taking away until there is no joy left. So the fact that you had such a dramatic and forced stop, right? Like it was COVID, that you literally could not do an IVF cycle, and it forced you to kind of take a redirection. I think that's just a really incredible story to share. But it's so hard when you're in the middle of it and you're like, I just want a baby. I don't want to stop. Like I want to. So if there's any way to kind of meld those two things together, where you're still moving forward, you're still moving in that direction, but you're not losing pieces of yourself along the way. I wish that people could find that connection.
Gosh, I relate to that so much because I didn't want to stop. I was devastated when all the clinics in my city shut down. I thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but it ended up being the best. But it's funny because obviously, like you said, I had that forced stop, but everyone that I work with now doesn't have that forced stop unless it's a financial situation, perhaps. And what do you do when you want to keep moving forward, but you realize that you've completely lost who you are and you've taken all the joy out of your life and you're miserable and you don't want to get up in the morning? So first of all, we have to recognize where we're at. We have to come to a place of realization and acceptance that we are not in a good place. And that's really hard because you feel so hard done by and so out of control in this situation. I did everything perfectly. I was healthy my whole life. I got married. I found the one. We started trying. What did I do wrong? Where did I miss things, And especially women, I find we're taught, you march to this beat of effort equals reward. I do well at school. I go to university. I get the job. I get all of the things that come with that. And it just doesn't work that way with fertility. It's just not how the world works. Sadly, there's no rhyme or reason who it chooses and why and how. So I think that if you can come to this place of awareness, that is the biggest gift you can give yourself, to say, I'm not happy. My relationship is suffering. I don't feel any joy in any of the things that I used to find fun. And it's a hard place because most people come to that after several rounds of treatment haven't been successful. Honestly, that's where most of my students will find me. They'll say, look, everything I've been doing isn't working. I need to do something differently. I need to get out of this rut. So I can't really help you get to that point. You just need to take a look at your life and everything that's going on and say to yourself, am I happy? And you don't have to be happy with infertility. Don't get me wrong. No one's going to be happy with that. But it can just be one part of your life. It doesn't have to be your entire life. So when you can come to that place of realization, then you have your power back. Then you can say, what can I possibly do to make myself a little happier? And like I said before, it sounds dramatic, but it really comes back to this sense of safety. Like your nervous system doesn't know that you're not under threat every day. So what can I do to remind my nervous system that I am safe? Little practices like switch off your phone an hour before you go to bed, switch off the TV. And I don't know what you want to do. Read a book, have a cup of tea, chat with your partner, have a bath, go for a walk, whatever works, but just take screens away because screens are incredibly stimulating. They mess up kind of the melatonin levels, and I'm sure you can explain this on a much more medical level, but it just gets your body out of this place of I'm awake, I've got to be doing, and it just starts to bring you back to a place of calm. And that can help things like sleep and recovery and rest and healing. Other things like when you get up in the morning, what is the first thing that you do? Are you grabbing your phone? Are you checking your emails? And your brain hasn't even had a chance to adjust to the day, yet you're throwing all of this cortisol at your body in amounts that it isn't really built to cope with. You're meant to kind of wake up gradually, see some sunshine, start your day in kind of a more of an even keel. But if you're checking your work emails and stressing because your boss has sent you something and it's thrown you off course, then that's a really awful start to your day. So I try to tell my students an hour before bed, an hour when you get up in the morning, no phone. And that's like a simple, practical thing that you can start to do. It's really hard. And I'm all talk some days, right? There are some days where I'm like, no, I really need to check my emails right now. But things like that. And then what can you do throughout your day just to give you back some time and space? And I hate this idea of restricting when you're going through infertility, because I was that person. I'm not dairy or gluten intolerant, but that was absolutely a no-go in my diet. And everything that I ate had to be organic. It had to be prepared in a certain way. I didn't like going out for dinners and to restaurants where I didn't know what oils they'd used, or whether they were sneaking in sauces that were high in sugar, and just all this crap that did not serve me. It just made me really hypervigilant and really boring. It's just not the way we need to live, when it's honestly, you're not going to not fall pregnant that month because you ate a piece of chocolate cake. Like, this is where my brain went. So I hate this idea of taking things away. What can you give yourself back? So do something every day that you do just because you love it. Whether that is the chocolate cake, whether that's, you know what, I'm just going to come home from work, I'm going to lie on the couch and read a book for half an hour, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. Maybe that is booking in a massage once a week if that's something that you love and is within your budget, or, you know, asking your partner to do something for you. There's no shame in just saying, look, I just need an afternoon where I don't have to think about it. I want to go off and do my own thing. Or maybe there's something you want them to do for you. You know, they can give you a massage. They can make you dinner. Just give yourself things back that are missing, where you can just go, you know what, I'm going to receive a bit of fun and a bit of love here. So little practical things throughout the day.
Love it.
One other thing that I absolutely love.
Add back. Stop restricting. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Can I just mention one more thing? As a yoga teacher, I have to, of course, mention meditation, because there's one thing that people hear about a lot and they roll their eyes and now I'm terrible at meditation. And I must tell everyone that everybody is bad at meditation on certain days, you know, and at certain times, and especially when you first begin. But if you can give yourself 5 or 10 minutes a day where you don't have to do anything, after a while you start to see what a gift that can be, and how easy it is to then make decisions from that place of calm and regulation, and just giving yourself back something as well. So there's a lot of things in there. I hope that some of them were helpful.
Wonderful ideas. And Jen, I just so appreciate your being here today and sharing that. How can people find you?
Sure. You can find me, my handle on socials is jen.element Pilates yoga. So I share a lot of learnings and teachings across my social media, as well as just fun, silly videos.
Yes, that's how I found you.
I find there's so much power in connecting with a bit of humor on this journey. But I do have a lot of free resources that you can find there that are a bit more practical. And if you want to start using some of these beautiful practices of fertility yoga and breathwork and meditation to support your journey and just give yourself back some of that peace, you can find all of those on my channels as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you for having me. And massive fangirl moment, Dr. Lora. We love you. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for having me today.
Oh, thanks, Jen. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I think Jennifer had a wealth of good recommendations in helping us prepare for all of those social interactions and wonderful questions that we might dread as we head into the holidays. You can find this episode and all the rest of the episodes at my website, drlorashahine.com. You can find more educational material on my YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok. I just love educating. Thank you to our friends at Seattle Sperm Bank and Braze Runs Production for sponsoring the show. Thank you to my incredible team, Shannon Perry and Audiotocracy, for producing the show. This is your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and until next week, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.